When she heard the word starch, she thought Roland was about to cook something delicious. Roland simply explained how to obtain starch. Although starch could make decent ingredients, Roland's focus was not on food. It was a key material for producing explosives. Nitroglycerin had not yet started to be trialed, and conditions for TNT were even more out of reach, so nitrocellulose became the most easily manufactured high explosive. While Roland was thinking about explosions, and Nightingale was contemplating new dishes, meanwhile there came a knock on the office door. The door creaked open, and Roland was surprised to see that it was Evelyn standing outside. She walked to the desk and bowed her head, seeming a little nervous. She wanted to ask a question, and Roland smiled, inviting her to ask anything she wanted. Evelyn, her voice trembling, asked why he had chosen her to come to the border town. Roland was slightly surprised by the question. Evelyn went on to say that her abilities were not outstanding, and that the salary Roland provided was enough to hire a professional brewer in the capital. Roland didn't answer but stood up and asked, "How do you find the taste of those drinks?" Evelyn gave her evaluation of all the alcohol. Roland stood up and opened a cabinet, taking out a jar of wheat beer from the top shelf and placing it in front of Evelyn. He asked her if she could transform this wheat beer into the baijiu he brewed. Evelyn extended her hands, held the jar, and soon the dim yellow liquor inside began to change. As bubbles surged, the beer became clearer and clearer, until it was as transparent as water. Roland tasted it, and it was indeed the taste of high-alcohol liquor. Roland said that this was the reason why he chose Evelyn. Looking at her puzzled face, he explained that he planned to open a brewery, and he wanted Evelyn to be his chief brewer. In the Palace Hall of Internal Winter City, Garcia Wimbledon, draped in a fur coat, sat on the throne, listening to the appeal and request of a nobleman. The kneeling nobleman hoped Garcia would help him seek justice. His son, a knight who had protected the former queen, had been killed by the church believers. He wished to take his soldiers into the mountains to capture those rebels and avenge his son, and he also hoped Garcia would provide him with snow powder. Garcia knew the powder was her trump card to change the situation on the battlefield, so she could not give it to him. Maybe the nobleman knew Garcia was going to refuse him. Before she could speak, he said that if Garcia agreed to his request, he would return to the court to serve her, and his whole family would fully support her rule over the kingdom of Internal Winter. This made Garcia shocked slightly. The church had executed the queen and wiped out a group of senior officials. She knew this nobleman had a great reputation in the kingdom. If she could gather the remaining nobles through him, she could alleviate the difficulties of administrative operation to a certain extent. She pondered for a moment, and finally made a decision. She would not give the powder directly to him, but she would send people to assist him when he needed it. When the nobleman left, one of Garcia's knights presented a glass of fruit wine and brought a letter from the King of Wolfheart. The letter stated that the church had sent troops again. They were departing towards Wolfheart City and had broken through several temporary defense lines. The knight couldn't believe it. The month of the demons was approaching. Did the church plan to abandon the new holy city? Garcia's face was grave. She hadn't expected the church to act so quickly. If she had few more months after the month of the demons, she would be better prepared. Clearly, the church didn't plan to give her that time. Garcia knew that if she refused the Wolf King's request for help, once the kingdom of Wolfheart fell, she wouldn't last much longer either. However, this was also an opportunity. If she could exhaust and hopefully wipe out the church's army in Wolfheart City, when the demonic beasts invade Hermes on a large scale, the church would face a disaster. She ordered her subordinates to prepare the Black Sail Fleet for the campaign. She planned to spend the winter in Wolfheart City this year. Meanwhile, back in the border town. Upon hearing that the prince planned to drop a giant bomb from a hot air balloon at an altitude of 2,000 meters onto the palace, Carter was somewhat incredulous. Axe, excited, said that if they really could drop the bomb right above Timothy, he would certainly be scared out of his wits. Roland smiled. Suddenly, a white shadow fell straight to the ground, raising a column of smoke and explosion in the test site. The dull landing sound came afterward. After a week of training, Lightning's bomb guiding skills had greatly improved. The test was very successful, and Roland announced that the air raid plan was officially launched. Roland called together the key personnel. The plan would be executed next Monday. Axe would lead a team of 50 musketeers to escort the witches. Roland did not plan to fly there directly in a hot air balloon because it was too far. According to the map, if they departed from Silverlight City, they could complete the bombing in one day and return before sunset. This time, Nightingale and Sylvie would be responsible for monitoring the surroundings of the camp, and the other 4 witches would carry out the airstrike. In the end, Roland urged everyone to pay attention to their safety. He would be waiting for their good news in the border town. May returned to border town once again, standing on the dock looking at the 2 large ships sailing away. 2 young actors wanted to ask questions, but Eileen was helpless and could only find May. The 2 girls looked at May with twinkling eyes, asking about the history of the witch's diary. After May answered their questions, Eileen pulled the 2 girls away, asking them to pack their bags and prepare to disembark. Eileen stood next to May, thanking her for bringing the girls who hadn't finished their drama class to border town. Even though Prince Roland didn't have high requirements for drama, Eileen feared that His Highness wouldn't accept them. May, however, said that she didn't plan for all of them to become actresses. Although these girls were still far from being ready for a stage performance, they could understand the scripts and could read and write, which was exactly what His Highness needed. May further explained that the prince was promoting drama not because of his own preferences, but with the intention of using it to promote positivism to the public. Excited, Eileen flung herself into May's arms, looking at her with admiration. Soon they arrived at the dock of border town. Eileen jumped off the ship and hugged Ferlin tightly. Ferlin thanked May for protecting Eileen during the theater conflict. Seeing the 2 of them acting sweetly with each other, May pursed her lips, shouldered her luggage alone, and headed for the residential area. The familiar figure she was expecting did not appear, even though he had solemnly promised in the letter to give her a surprise. Although the luggage was not heavy, she felt somewhat disappointed. Back home, May put down her package. She knew that the man she was thinking of was an important figure next to His Highness, and could not move around as freely as ordinary people. A long-lost sense of relaxation hit her. She let out a long sigh and took out some wine from the cabinet, just about to have a drink when there was a knock at the door. Standing outside was none other than Carter. He wiped the sweat off his forehead, having not expected the boat to arrive an hour early. When he heard that she had arrived, he had rushed over from the military camp. He apologized for his tardiness. Oddly enough, despite not seeing him at the dock and despite him not being there to greet her, seeing Carter now, May's mood instantly lifted. May invited Carter to have a drink, but he politely declined because he still had tasks to complete. The chief knight took out a small red wooden box from his pocket and handed it to her. May thought it was a new product from the market and opened the lid, only to see a golden ring standing quietly at the bottom of the box. At the top of it was a sparkling clear gemstone. Carter knelt on one knee and asked May, "Will you marry me?" The witches in the First Army had been on the road for 4 days now. According to the plan, they should arrive at the outskirts of Silver Light City by tomorrow afternoon. With the help of the flying messengers, controlled by Honey, Roland could receive letters from the team every day. In the absence of Nightingale, Chief Knight Carter took over the responsibility of guarding the castle and the prince. However, what puzzled Roland was that Carter seemed to be in a very good mood these days, as if he had encountered something particularly happy. Was it that delightful to return to his original job of guarding him personally? Seeing the rapid progress of Border Town's construction projects in recent months, Roland was delighted. Suddenly, Kyle rushed into the office, excitedly declaring that he had successfully developed the large-scale acid-making method. Roland stood up in excitement, asking Kyle to take him to see. They arrived at the laboratory by the Crimson Water River, where a very young-looking man bowed to Roland. Roland recognized him as Charles, whom Kyle often mentioned. Charles led Roland to several gray and white tanks and a furnace. Each tank was about 4 meters high, with pipes connected at the top. Kyle explained the operation and results, and Roland excitedly patted the lead tank, asking about the production output. Charles picked up his notebook and said that the daily output was about the same as a week's amount from the laboratory's distillation method, and it could be further increased with larger tanks. Roland was delighted, instructing Charles and Kyle to construct larger-scale devices in a few days. If there wasn't enough lead, they could substitute it with iron. Psoriasis coating could protect the iron from acid corrosion. Kyle nodded in agreement, but his next words froze Roland's smile on his face. Now that there were significant results with the large-scale acid-making method, and the 5 laboratories were all filled with apprentices, could he finally receive the promised intermediate chemistry book from His Highness? Scroll was tidying up the books on Roland's shelf, the autumn sun shining on Roland's back through the window. The prince would occasionally jot down a few lines on paper, then began to ponder with his hand on his forehead, while saying some words incomprehensible. Scroll sighed softly, regretting that she couldn't help him. Among the witches, perhaps only Anna could assist him in this regard. The prince had written several pages earlier, and Scroll had committed them all to memory, but that was all she could do. This knowledge was far more advanced than the mathematics and other subjects she had encountered before. Seeing the prince's headache, Scroll suggested he should rest for the day. Roland dropped the pen as if surrendering, leaning back in his chair and exhaling. He envied Scroll's perfect memory. Scroll smiled and said that it wasn't always good to remember everything. For example, bad experiences, sadness, and sorrow were better forgotten for one's happiness. Recalling Scroll's past, Roland probably guessed what she was thinking and showed a sorry smile while saying she is right. This sent a warm sensation through Scroll's heart. Rarely did anyone care about a witch's feelings, let alone when that person was a member of the royal family. Prince Roland was completely different from all the other nobles she had ever met. He had profound knowledge, yet he spent his days trying to teach it to others. He was of noble status but did not display an exclusive attitude. He had the admiration of the people and could do whatever he wanted. But not only did he not do so, he took care of others' feelings. Now, Scroll found her thoughts were gradually changing. In the past, she didn't agree with the prince marrying a witch, but at this moment, she felt that no matter who the prince marries, nothing would stop him from ascends to the throne of Grey Castle. He relied not on the conventional, power-hungry nobles, but on the people who supported him because he brought them a better life. Roland rubbed his head. This was the last page. He planned to hand it over to Kyle like this, along with a physics textbook. That should be enough for him to study for a while. Roland pulled out a new piece of paper and quickly wrote down a few words. After all, it's a book from the ancient times, missing a large part is quite normal, right? Scroll stepped out of the office, her attention drawn by the splendid view of the back garden. Leaf, using her ability, had filled the backyard with a variety of plants. The garden was filled with plants that Leaf had improved, various fruit trees and crops, as well as dozens of bird nests where the messenger birds raised by honey slept. Scroll had always thought that Leaf could be the first witch with an evolved ability. Leaf recalled the prince saying that evolution originated from understanding one's own abilities. She could sense that evolution was not far from her. Her eyes sparkled with a bright light. Animals are life, plants are also life, even the cells that make them up are life. Looking at this garden, she felt that she had found her direction forward. Under the watchful eye of Sylvie, the team moved in such a way to avoid all scrutiny, not attracting anyone's attention from start to finish. Once the camp was set up, the following day, the hot air balloon was slowly ascending, commencing its mission of the airstrike. Anna leaned over the edge of the basket and asked Lightning if she was tired. Lightning shook her head, saying she could fly for an entire day. Wendy also moved closer, telling her to not feel too tense. Lightning saying she had practiced many times and the palace was so big that she couldn't possibly miss. Wendy smiled, advising Lightning not to overdo it and reminding her that His Highness had emphasized that her safety was most important. Wendy gently told Lightning that what happened during the scout wasn't her fault. Everyone could see Lightning's dejection over the past few days. Not everyone was adept at fighting. Anna also consoled her, asking her to rest for a while. Seeing both of them say so, Lightning gave a soft hum through her nose and flew into the basket with her head drooping. After a morning's flight, Maisie flapped her wings back to the hot air balloon, reporting to the three that the inner city of the royal capital was already in sight. The royal capital was not unfamiliar to the witches of the Witch Union, who had once hidden in the slums of this city for several months. Compared to other cities, the capital was very harsh in its pursuit of witches. Almost every month, witches were executed in the tiered plaza of the outer city district. Wendy manipulated the air currents, keeping the basket steadily suspended above the royal capital. Everyone was well practiced in the next steps. As the bomb descended, Lightning quickly caught up with the bomb, beginning to adjust its trajectory bit by bit. She had no affection for this bustling capital, and if she could drop the bomb right above Timothy, ending his life, she would be more than willing to do so. If Roland were to rule the kingdom of Grey Castle, all of these tragedies could have been avoided. The wind whistled in her ears, the view on the ground expanded, and the details of the palace and the inner city gradually revealed themselves before Lightning. As the altitude plummeted, the parachute quickly reached its release point. Lightning pulled the mechanism, allowing the parachute to detach from the bomb, while at the same time, she embraced it and climbed upward rapidly. Before leaving, Prince His Highness repeatedly instructed that she must ascend to a sufficiently high safety position before the bomb hits the ground, and never look back at the explosion. However, the little girl couldn't resist her curiosity. A dazzling flash of light ignited at the top of the palace and quickly expanded. The incandescent light turned into bright orange-red, then disappeared into the rolling smoke. This process lasted less than a minute, and the entire royal capital could hear the explosion. The knights hurriedly led Timothy to the basement. Along the way, Timothy saw shattered glass filling the corridors. Through the broken windows, the dome of the castle on one side was no longer there. In the continually rising smoke and dust, only a few solitary stone pillars remained of this magnificent building. Timothy knew that what had just happened was definitely not an earthquake but the effect of a large amount of snow powder exploding. He couldn't believe that his younger brother also had such a weapon. He didn't know how Roland managed to bury the snow powder in the palace. As soon as he stepped into the basement, Timothy grabbed the collar of a nearby knight, instructing him to thoroughly search the entire palace area. All suspicious persons, regardless of whether they were nobles, attendants or servants, needed to be thoroughly investigated. After the knight left, Timothy realized that his back was soaked with cold sweat. Roland had actually managed to do it. Your position is not as safe as you imagined, and everyone will see that your throne is already tottering. Thinking of this warning, Timothy couldn't help but shiver. As his anger gradually subsided, he felt fear rising from his feet. He fiercely punched the broken wall. Roland received a secret message from the royal capital. The letter was written by Tassa for Roland and was delivered by the flying messenger. The letter stated that the palace was quickly sealed off, and everyone was prohibited from entering or leaving, so he was unable to know the situation inside the palace. By evening, all the residents knew about the attack on the palace, and everyone was discussing this matter. Coupled with Roland's previous warning, many people even thought that Timothy had already died. The major nobles outside the royal capital showed no movement, and the response from the palace side was also very swift. Tassa believed that Timothy had not died. Tassa informed Roland that he would be used this attack to portray it as divine punishment for Timothy's tyrannical acts. Tassa have already collected evidences